Eric Pauly here to talk about all things Washington Commanders. So happy to have you back. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely, Kate. Thank you for having me. Always excited to talk Commanders.
Okay, let's start with the draft. Eric, which of all of their draft picks stood out to you this year? Which ones did you like?
So, my favorite draft pick for the Commanders is actually their seventh round pick, running back Ja'Cory Crosby
Okay.
Merritt from Arizona. We discussed prior to the draft how it was inevitable that Washington was going to draft a running back, considering that Austin Eckler's on the tail end of his career. Brian Robinson, though having some productive games, they clearly didn't trust him fully going into the season, or I guess I should say, as the season progressed, it showed that he was falling a little bit out of favor with that running back room. They really used to utilize like Chris Rodriguez and some other backs as well. So Washington taking running back was always kind of inevitable. And then now they take a running back who is had injury issues during his collegiate career, but it's also when translating to the NFL, like of course you have to always be cognizant of injuries. Injuries are inevitable in the sport of football, but this is a running back without a lot of tread on his tires. And in his final year at New Mexico, rushed for almost 1,200 yards and 17 touchdowns, a 4.45 40-yard dash guy at his pro day. And we know that Cliff Kingsbury and Washington is going to get creative with their running backs and the receivers out of the backfield now with the acquisition of Deebo Samuel. So I'm
Mm,
very excited for this running back seventh round pick for Washington. I think this could be a sneaky player who is going to get a ton of snaps down the stretch for Washington and actually probably carve out a massive role for himself in Washington's offense, even with the skill players around him.
mm. Are there any picks that you think could be boom or bust? One that I'm looking at, I was a bit shocked that Trey Amos fell to the second round, but now you bring up injuries. There are reports that he has been dealing with a back issue. Is that something that concerns you? Could this be a boom or bust player for you?
Absolutely. So Washington needed help, a lot of help on their secondary and on their defensive line. And based on their draft, they put a focus in on the secondary as they did not draft an edge rusher or even another defensive tackle to add to the mix there, as they're relying on some other veterans, older players, and some acquisitions they made. But Trey Amos, I absolutely like what I've seen from him in college. I know that he was a transfer, and that's always a little bit of a concern when you go from a big program to obviously Ole Miss, still a massive program, but making that kind of jump is always something considered because he went to Louisiana Lafayette, then to
Mhm.
Alabama, then to Ole Miss, so something to consider. But um, he's not a player that I think is going to be boom or bust per se because we do still have Marshall Lattimore. Mikey Sanders
Right.
is still, of course, a ascending player after a fantastic rookie year, and we signed Jonathan Jones, a proven veteran in this league. So in a perfect world, Amos picks up everything very quickly and is a contributor from day one. But it's very possible that Trey Amos is not a starter week one for the Commanders.
Mm. Are there any additional free agent pieces you'd like to see them add this offseason?
So it's a great question, and of course, Katie, you always want to see your teams improving, especially when you do have cap space and
Right.
there are clear needs. However, with this free agent class, that's of course, we're deep into this situation now, and we will see some teams
Yeah.
get cut throughout the spring programs, throughout the starts of training camp. So I'm okay with Washington kind of taking a wait and see approach to see who has their issues with contracts or their issues with perceived playing time. I see a lot of Washington Commander Twitter fans asking for the Commanders to go after Trey Hendrickson in a trade
Mm.
for the end. But with that being said, I think that the Commanders, it comes to a point for every team where you have to still continue to develop that funnel of young players even after going out and getting some veterans. So I'm not too bullish on Washington making a move like that, considering what it probably would
Mm.
cost and our depleted capital for the next draft. But with that being said, I would absolutely expect Washington to bring in a edge rusher, considering the likelihood that there will be probably some cuts or some disputes between contracts for these guys who want big deals. I think Washington should take a patient approach for filling those needs in edge rusher.
I feel like every team fan base's Twitter would also love to have Trey Hendrickson. So, what are the remaining holes on this team? You bring up edge. What are some other remaining holes that you see that you'd like to be filled on this team?
So we did draft another wide receiver. Of course, you in Deebo Samuel. With that being said, I still think Washington could use another receiver. Now our
Mm.
receiving room looks a little bit better than it did a year. But that being said, I think Washington could still use like an impact player. Of course, the receiver they drafted be a miss. He's a speed guy. He's a big, relative athletic score guy. But with that being said, as we've seen over the past couple of drafts, those guys who profile as these really athletic guys, receivers that are drafted in like the second to fourth round, not always a great hit rate despite having all the athletic tools. So I think wide receiver could still be a problem for Washington. And they've made a lot of improvements to the O line, or at least attempted to, but you can
Mhm.
never have too much of linemen, which Washington at this point does have a stable, but I would like to see potentially an upgrade. Of course, the edge. We could probably use another wide receiver, and you can never go wrong with having too many linemen as a rival to Philadelphia Eagles. Even the Cowboys probably last, 3, 4 years prior to this year. Us that can never go wrong with having too many good linemen.
So we spoke probably a week or two into free agency. Now that a lot of the free agency moves have been made, now that the draft is over, how would you grade their offseason moves as a whole this season?
I would think Washington did a very good job, gun to head kind of rating. I would give them a B. I think Washington
Okay.
did a great job by going to get a protector for Jaden Daniels, their franchise. So, of course, Katie, you have to kudos for that movement. They doubled down on that by Connery, an offensive lineman, in the first round. And then they, went to get Debo Samuel, which is a situation where a lot of speculation about if he's healthy, if he wants to, if he really is an elite player. But I think that
Mhm.
consider that like while Debo Samuel is a very good football player, we didn't go out and get a wide receiver one. We went out and got a gadget type player that's going to hopefully get us around 1,000 yards and add it to Cliff Kingsbury's offense. On the defensive side, focus a little bit more on some veterans, and I like the Trey Amos pick, like we mentioned as well. So I don't think Washington did anything to um, I guess the best way to put it is they know that they're in this window with Jaden Daniels' rookie contract, and for that negotiation the next couple of years, it's going to be a very large figure. So I think they're doing a good job trying to maximize that window now and not give up a ton of future capital. They did in the draft and they did a little bit in next year's draft they tapped into. But with that being said, they still have enough pieces throughout this draft, which seen them making some selections that hopefully pan out. Next year, they still have their first round pick, which of course is going to be important. So I think that we'll see Washington, if they continue this balanced attack of maintaining some premium capital in the draft to rebuild this roster organically, as well as taking some calculated swings on free agents or some trades for players like a Debo Samuel and a Laramie Tunsil, who is potentially a top left tackle in football. I don't think you stuff up to go for everything to go right. Of course, in the NFL, anything can happen, but Washington did a good job of setting themselves up for a up season to the NFC Championship game. And while it's very plausible with a tougher schedule and a bigger target on their back, Washington more games than they did last year, but also has a better team at the same time. So be interested in Washington because it's not a situation where they made these they got to win 14 games. It's very tough to win 14 games in the NFL. They could still
Mhm.
win 10 fewer than last year, and the season could still be an absolute. So I think Washington did a good job of setting themselves up for success now without digging too deep into resources for the future.
Thanks for watching this episode on the BetCanada channel. I have more Commanders content coming with Eric, so hit that subscribe button.